Be recorded.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this joint meeting of the King George Board of Supervisors and the Service Authority Board of Directors to session.
And I hereby call this meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors.
Okay. Do we have anybody that would like to give invocation to start us out? Mr. Granger? Everyone please rise. Lord, we come before you, thank you for what you have. Great. Thank you. That there is continue to watch forward and county is great. You have receiving all of that. Good government. I think that would be best in the county, the best direction for good work, like this work. We got our actions to the Lord in your name. In the name of Christ. All right, thank you, everyone. Right now, we're going to open up the floor for public comment. If anybody's here for public comment, you can come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. There is a timer on the screen, and if you do, you can come up and state your name and address. Anyone here for public comment tonight?
Good. Good evening. My name's John. I'm president of Virginia, 2414 branch of the First Office of Virginia. We also own property in we have a water and good to be back in King George. I appreciate this opportunity to have a few brief moments. But some of you will recall that Aqua, Virginia was here in 2018. I'm glad I wasn't in charge of the IT system. Thank you very much at that time. But we were the interim general manager for 6 months of the authority, running the water and wastewater systems, all the operations. During that time, we improved operations, compliance, training, and maintenance. We restored damaged relationships with DEQ and VDH, the key regulators. Following that time frame, we submitted a proposal to purchase all assets of the service authority, each water system, each wastewater system, storage tanks, lift stations, pump stations, all pertinent real estate, which would turn those into real estate assets that would result in tax roll increases for the county also. That included a purchase price at that time. Since that time, we now have legislation that I sponsored back in 2020 called fair market value. It's in the Code of Virginia, and it's also in the rules and regulations of the State Corporation Commission now. That provides an opportunity for a company like mine to make a higher priced offer than we did back in 2018, which was based on the depreciated original cost. And that's a price that can be negotiated and discussed and is based upon appraisals by qualified appraisers, utilizing 3 of those. One to represent my company, one to represent the seller, the authority, and the other to represent the State Corporation Commission. So it's a very formal, clear, procedural process. King George is a wonderful area with a great opportunity for economic development and continued lifestyle and service to the citizens and the constituents that live here now. Adequate water and sewer is integral to that, and I know that's been a discussion point in the past. It'll be a discussion point this evening. I request that the leadership consider all options to evaluate your options the overall service and financial benefit to the county that a sale of the assets to a professionally regulated company like my own could benefit. There is no obligation to do so, to make that consideration. And there's also negotiations regarding the costs involved in that can be part of any proposal we submit and further conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Dines, anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Has anybody received correspondence that they need to be read? All right, seeing none, I will now close public comment and get on to discussion and direction. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both board, the members of both boards. So I think that, I guess where I would start is what is being proposed, and we've had obviously some discussions with the members. There was kind of a nice homework session that we provided information, and Mr. Lauck with Davenport Associates, who is here, was also present, and we discussed kind of what this option is. And what the option is that is to bring the service authority under the county auspices as a Department of Public Utilities. It is meant to streamline things, meant to ensure that there's coordination in terms of the delivery of water and sewer services, which are so essential to any government, especially to a government that encounters growth that we are encountering. We already have some degree of unification, if you will, in terms of the administration of some of the finances and some of the, the HR options, also the county engineers services. But what this is really all about was the idea of it all coming under the county, and to ensure that there was better coordination of financial and human resources operations, the county engineer, also the community development function. And so what's being proposed and what you've got information on is essentially the creation of another department under the county of the King George County Board of Supervisors. How do we get here? I think the most important thing is when you do a review of the past history, there have been a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges, a lot of things that have gone on in the county, King George County Service Authority that have merited the attention of a lot of the ratepayers, but also the citizens of this county, and have merited the attention of Board of Supervisors as well as the Board of Directors. And I first of all say that, without a doubt, the Board of Directors of Service Authority they've done an outstanding job of addressing the financial concerns of the King George Service Authority. The previous general manager, and with the help of the Davenport Associates, got a plan together, and with the guidance of the board, and they're in the middle of that plan. They had an update in October of 21 that presented where they were in that plan. And I think it's a very ambitious plan, and it's one that if it continues to be implemented, to continue to be followed, then it will help the King George County Service Authority continue to get itself in a better position financially. And what this proposal is to do all the other aspects of what you would expect from a service entity like a service authority, is to help with the management of personnel, help with the management of the finances, help with the interactions that the service authority has with the community development department and the county engineer. And that's essentially what this is all about. What we have for you tonight is a couple of things. And it's essentially the information that you all received the last time that you dealt with this issue, but there is a memo to you all from me that's at your desk that essentially talks about, kind of the timeline, first of all. So if you go to that memo, 60 to 90 days, we will begin the discussions. And we are in that period of time. I will tell you this, that one of the things that when I took over as the interim general manager, we were able to have the personnel functions and the financial functions all under the county, begin to coordinate all the King George County Service Authority financial and personnel functions as well, to start making sure that we were doing the right things there in terms of how the bid laws were interpreted and carried out, and how people were hired and people were evaluated. Those things are in place, and addressing any challenges that we had there. And here we are, first quarter of 2022, and we're holding a joint meeting to discuss this proposal. We have an org chart. I don't know, Chris, do you have that? Just a proposed org chart of if you did something to the effect of creating a public utility department under the county. It would look essentially, coming drum roll. Oh, I thought we sent that. Okay, on the back of your page, I guess there is an org chart on the back of the page. Essentially, a public utilities department would consist of the construction inspector, county engineer, and then the service authority functions, which are water, wastewater, and maintenance. And it would come under a department head that then would come under the county administrator, and then ultimately the county board of supervisors. There would still continue to be a board of directors of the service authority. I think if anything, they would be an advisory board to the county supervisors. And, because of the fact, the unique nature of this service authority, that it does not serve every citizen in this county, because some citizens are on wells or on septics. These people would, the board of directors would essentially kind of be the liaisons to those ratepayers, between the ratepayers and the board of supervisors. So that's essentially kind of one of the things that we had talked about. And this is a proposal, and I think that's the most important thing to remember. This isn't something that's been set in stone. It's something that we have been analyzing and trying to come up with the best way of framing this and discussing it. And I think that, we are here because obviously both boards have to have some kind of an approval of this to have this happen. And that's why we wanted to get you all together and have a discussion. One of the other things that is important to note is that we have looked at from an auditor standpoint, we've looked at the controls, which I think is very important. We cannot mix water and sewer revenue with general fund or general property tax money. So when somebody pays their tax for their home and their property, it goes to the general revenues of the county. And when somebody pays their water and sewer, it goes to the service authority. It would continue to exist in a segregated state. You cannot mix the funds. It's actually a problematic in an audit, that you would have serious problems financially if you did that. So that is something that is very much understood, and we are not obviously proposing that. Your auditor has weighed in on that, and we would make sure that those things are in place. And they're in place right now, obviously, but it would continue that way to deal with that. I guess the other thing that I would point out is that we have Kyle Louch with with Davenport and Associates, and he's here to talk through any of the financial documents that we did provide to you all, and he's prepared to do that if you would like. So I'll rely on whatever you guys want to do.
Well, we can start with some questions for you, for anybody at the table here. Anybody have questions for Mr. Miller, what he just presented? Ms. Gupta?
I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do we, and I'm not sure if this is a question for Mr. Miller or for Ms. Lackey, but do we have any examples of another locality in Virginia that has done something similar to what is being proposed? Another locality that had a service authority and then decided to bring it under the county proper as a utility department?
Yes, in 2020, Pennsylvania decided to dissolve its service authority. It started the process in 2020, and in 2021, it was fully dissolved and became a county utility.
And I know also that, Stafford has a public utilities department. I believe that Spotsylvania County has a utilities department. The city of Fredericksburg obviously is part of the city. The water and sewer is part of the city. I think that Mr. Parker, framed it earlier in a discussion that he and I were having, where he was saying that, size is one of the determining factors if you have a separate utility. And we are such a small size that it doesn't make any real sense if you have a separate utility, because your administrative costs will eat you up. And, that's something that I think is one concern, is that, we are not doing that in terms of putting an administrative cost from the county onto the board of directors of the service authority to operate and to do HR and to do finance and things like that. And that's something that if we remain in that, I don't know that the county can continue to have that free service. It's something that you have to be very much cognizant of. But Mr. Parker had that comment that most of the separate service authorities or utilities are in the bigger jurisdictions.
Thank you. And can I ask one follow-up question from the answer? So you mentioned some county resources that are being used. I don't think you mentioned the county attorney, but to my knowledge, the service authority proper does not pay her separately for the work she does for us as well.
That's correct.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else with questions?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Bender?
Ms. Lackey, the information you had, I just pulled up an article from the Star Tribune about July 2nd, 2021 about dissolving the service authority. And there's not a lot of information here. Is there more specifics? And where I'm coming from is going back to the original articles of incorporation for the service authority. It was set up as a corporation and a public, I think a body politic is what they referred to it as. So do you have a lot of information of how Pennsylvania did it? I mean,
I do, to the extent that I pulled publicly available information. I haven't yet contacted their legal counsel. But there is a process that's specified by the Virginia Code, and it would require that first the Service Authority Board adopt a resolution with a conclusion that either the purposes it was created for are completed, impractical, impossible, or that the duties and responsibilities are going to be assumed by another public entity. And then the Board of Supervisors would need to adopt a resolution with the same findings. And they would authorize articles of dissolution to be filed with the State Corporation Commission. After that, there would be, some mechanics involved, transferring assets and liabilities and things like that. And when the affairs are wound up, you would file articles of termination with the State Corporation Commission. And at that point in time, everything would be fully under the county.
Following up with that answer, since, and when, in the research that I did, it seemed that other localities created their service authority as a nonprofit and ours was a business corporate. Is Pennsylvania the exact same, or are we under a little different because we were set up as a corporation?
To my knowledge, is that the same framework. So it's a body politic under the Virginia organizational rules, but it's also a corporation, a service authority authorized under Virginia statute.
Thank you. I have more questions to come.
Mr. Morris.
Yes, sir. These are more questions to clarify things and so the public understands some of these points. Some of this is to streamline things. Currently, the Service Authority does not have an attorney. We rely on the services of Ms. Lackey. And if something arises where both of us, the county and the Service Authority, would need representation, she would have to default to the county and we would have to go out and hire legal counsel from the outside who may not be fully up to speed of everything that is going on, correct?
I would leave that to Ms. Lackey if she felt there was a conflict, but yes, if there was a conflict, then she would obviously not be able to represent the service
And
authority.
then in other areas, there is no formal HR person or HR department in the Service Authority. The county HR only serves essentially in an advisory capacity. They can make recommendations to the manager for personnel actions, but they cannot implement them.
So the county personnel policy was adopted by the Service Authority, and so but the Service Authority, but in that county policy, it indicates that the general manager gets to call the shots on all the day-to-day personnel decisions, which is, if you have a separate thing, it would of course be that way. But when it comes to if there would be a dispute between the general manager's decision and say HR's decision, then the general manager's decision would carry. So it's kind of like, why are you following the personnel policies of the county? The other aspect of that would be that they're just, that uniformity kind of has examples. There were merit increases or raises given at a different time for Service Authority members as opposed to county members. So that lacks uniformity. We have been, from the county side, we've been involved in looking into issues of personnel for a number of months on some things that they just didn't have the training. The person who's probably the closest to an HR person would be Miss Norris Barker, and she's essentially a kind of a coordinator, and she does about 90 different things, and HR would be 91. So I mean, that's the problem, is there isn't really that there, and that's where Ms. Samil, our HR director, has been very helpful in this. But when if there's going to be a conflict between somebody's interpretation, the general manager has the sway in terms of the way the personnel policies are written. And I think I missed the rest of some of your other questions. I'm sorry.
Well, just how this is going, how the perspective is of how this is going to help streamline and make things better. I'm thinking also like along the line of EEO, if there is an EEO complaint and the handling of it, because the way I see it right now, the employee either goes to their supervisor, and if the problem's with their supervisor, then they would have to go to the state or the federal, versus if they fell under the general county, then they could go to the general county HR and EEO coordinator. Again, I'm not fluent in EEO stuff, and I'm going back on old EEO training I had years ago. But it just seems like a lot of these ancillary duties are not present on a regular basis in the service authority. There's been, I know, disconnects, or not disconnects, but delays and stuff going back and forth between finance and service authority and finance, or with economic development, because it seems projects come and then it has to go from there over to the service authority, then we have to look at it and we have to take an action, then it goes back, and then that can affect the action of what the Board of Supervisors do, whether they propose or approve or disapprove a project. And it just seems like a lot of tossing the ball around instead of a nice linear line of progression of getting things done.
I think that's a perfect way of characterizing it. Is no doubt that, you know, the service authority can have a separate relationship with a developer. It can have a separate relationship with a proposed manufacturer. You know, there's a process for development review where you know, we have a number of departments involved in that, and the service authority is part of that. And there is an attempt, I think, from Ms. Hall, the community development director, to kind of pull everything together. But certainly there's no obligation. If the Board of Supervisors were to make an agreement with a major developer or a major manufacturer, the service authority could say, we can't provide those services, or we don't want to provide those services in a certain way. And that's one of those examples of a disconnect. That's one of those examples where the process is just not seamless. The process is not unified. And I think then you go back to the first example that you had about the HR, and I think it's very much clear that, you know, from the standpoint of making sure that employees are trained every year and that they're up to speed on their certification. I think Ms. Norris Barker does a great job on that, but you don't have an overall organizational effort to make sure that every employee in this county is up to speed and is at the best level of their service capacity that they can provide, because that's what Ms. Samil does. I mean, she gets up every day and thinks about employees and what we can do to make them better and how we can take care of them and things like that. And so you have a kind of, in a sense, you just have an organization that's there, that's doing the best it can and under the circumstances and trying to provide the best services. But you also have this, it's kind of a hybrid where they maybe don't necessarily come under that accountability or that oversight that's going to ensure that things are being done in the best manner possible. And I think that's what you have when you bring it under the county. You could have that in a much better way than you are at this point.
Thank you, sir. Nothing else.
Mr. Collins?
So you've talked about the government taking over the authority, but we haven't talked about why the government exists is for the customers and the citizens. So I've attended or been on a video conference with every water authority meeting. My first question is, this is the first public meeting that I'm aware of that this topic of discussion has occurred. Has there been any discussion with the water authority in regards to this particular proposal?
Are you asking me?
Whoever wants to answer.
So are you asking is this we had you were part of the information assessor meetings, right? The 2-on-2s. Those meetings were literally meetings to consider whether to consider, right? And this is an option. It's under consideration. And myself, there'll be we'll be holding more public information sessions in my district, Mr. Granger's district. So there'll be a lot of public comment before this, and this is kind of getting the ball, this is the part where we get the ball rolling to toss the idea out. Why is it going this way, right? Because that's what everybody else does. The successful counties surrounding us, right, are Spotsylvania, Stafford, even Caroline County. They all have utilities. There's a reason they all have utilities, and I can get into that. It's if you really want, but it's really a size differentiator. The only real authority I know that operates real well are these big ones like in Prince William and whatnot. And right now, for all intents and purposes, this is a utility, right? Whether you want to pretend it isn't or it is or isn't, for all intents and purposes, it is, right? This is operating as a service authority, as an authority. We'd have our own HR department. We'd have our own legal department. We have our own purchasing department, own finance, all that stuff. And the big, great thing about an authority is nobody on the board of supervisors would be on it. You wouldn't have any input, right? That's what an authority does. An authority goes, I want to build a wastewater treatment plant on that property. I got 20 million bucks. That's what I'm doing. We'd have to put in through the counties, obviously the engineering department and whatnot to do it, but we go, want to do it, I'm doing it tomorrow. You know, that's how it works. It cuts, the whole purpose is to cut out the political back and forth of, oh, should we do it? Should we not do it? Whatever. But we don't have that. So the reason we're at this juncture is because realistically, whether people want to admit it or not, it's operating as a utility. It really is. There's just a paper barrier between the two for some reason, right? We rely on the county attorney heavily. We rely on county HR, and there's actually because of the way it's set up, there's a bad disconnect that causes HR not to be able to operate properly. We have the county purchasing. They run our RFPs and our RFQs. It's all run by the county. We are, for all intents and purposes, a utility without the benefits of being a utility. So that's why this is the reason the discussions come up, and it's come up this direction because of issues, you know, that personnel issues and whatnot that have arisen that we've recently come upon. But this is the initial thought process probably came from myself talking to Mr. Miller about looking into it. Why? Because I'm a civil engineer. I operate with all the utilities in most of the state. No joke on that. So when looking at what everybody else does, how it works properly, how they get things done, where our size-wise and what we're already doing, the utility discussion came up. That's where we started seeing if there was even a consideration, if anybody would want to consider it. That's where we started those 2x2 meetings. So this is literally the first meeting for public where we said, okay, we met 2-on-2 might be an idea we want to consider. Right now, it's time to start talking about it, because there's a lot of paperwork on both sides to make sure that, you know, customers are secure. Also to make sure citizens of King George who aren't on the system are secure. There's a lot of legal stuff that can be done to lock that up, but that would be board of supervisor stuff, not necessarily board of directors. But you have to have a starting point. So this is the starting point where we start and say, hey, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Let's get some public input. This is the first salvo for public input. And I would suggest other people try to get as much public input as possible. But this is that first salvo. This is letting people know it's a consideration, and to let the citizens have time to comment back, basically, because there's no decisions being made. I don't think anytime soon. You're talking, I don't see for many months before anything really starts a decision-making process, because there's a lot of information gathering that needs to go on in between.
So my question was, is this the first public meeting? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
May I add on to what Mr. Parker was saying? When this idea was first floated, we determined that there was 4 questions that we had to get a yes answer to before moving forward. The first one was from the county attorney. Is this something we could do legally? Was there anything in the legislation that would prevent us from doing this? And the answer was no, that we could go ahead. There's nothing legally stopping us. Question 1 answered. Question 2, can we do this financially and not create an additional burden on the county? We spoke with our representatives from Davenport. We had a meeting with them and they said, no, there's no reason why financially you cannot go ahead with this proposal. Third, was there going to be any HR problems? Was there going to be problems with employees from the service authority moving under the county and their benefits and retirement, et cetera? And the answer we got from HR was no, there was nothing that could prevent us from moving forward. And then the fourth yes that had to be answered, and if any one of these had been a no prior to this, we wouldn't even be here today. It would be a done dead idea. So the final was from Ms. Hahn and the folks at finance and what would have to occur with her department and the service authority. And the answer we got from her was, yes, we can go forward. There isn't going to be any major obstacles to move forward with this. So now the next step is we float it as public hearing and we get everybody's input. Nothing was done to hide anything for anybody. It was, can we move forward with this? And now the thing is, what options do we have? Do we stay where we are? Do we move into a utilities department? Do we put out an RFQ from folks like Aqua Virginia and Aramark and a few others who have expressed an interest? But this is the juncture where we're at. This is why we're having the thing. This is where people can speak up. Our intent was not to shift financial burden to the county. Everything's going to stay under the service authority, as was pointed out, that our water and sewer funds are going to stay separate. The biggest thing that I see is just streamlining a lot of this, and we're anticipating, and I've heard it from different members of the Board of Supervisors, we're anticipating more growth when this new bridge gets finished. And we've got to be on the same page of where we're going. And if we're going to survive, a community cannot survive on a residential tax base. As much as we would all love to stay a nice little rural community and our houses and our little plots of land, I go back to government 101 that I learned in college and in the ICMA manual, which was the Bible for anybody going into public service, and the whole chapter on finances. You do not survive on a residential tax base. You need commercial and industrial taxpayers to survive. What do commercial and industrial clients need? They're going to need water and sewer, especially water. Okay? I know Lowe's has been talking about moving over here, but the water requirement for a Lowe's just for their fire protection system is astronomical. I would love to have a Lowe's right here and not have to drive into town. But we have to look forward at these things. Okay? Does anybody know what they're paying on their fire insurance for their home? Do you know that that is based on the ISO rating of the county? And it goes from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst. I live halfway between station 1 and station 2. My ISO rating for my house is 10. So I pay my fire insurance based on as if there was no fire department in this county. There's 30,000 gallons of water 2 doors down from my house in a service authority tank that my insurance gets no credit for. So you think, oh, I'm on well. I don't need the county water. Yes, you do. Because every time we can expand it, every time we can put another fire hydrant in, it improves our ISO rating and it means we pay less in fire insurance. Now, would you rather pay money into improving the fire protection and your fire department, or would you rather write that check every month to State Farm or Erie or whoever you have as an insurance? So let's think globally and not locally. You know, everyone's like, well, I'm well, I don't need it. I don't have kids in school, but I pay for schools. Schools eat what, 60, 70% of our budget, of the county budget every year? Yes, no, maybe?
It's a little lower than that.
Okay. But if you look at neighboring jurisdiction, what's coming, it's up to 70%. So if we get more development and we get more houses and we get more residents, we're going to have to build more schools. What are we going to need to service those schools? We're going to need water and sewer. So again, we have to be looking at the big picture here, and we got to get more efficient and everything.
So none of that, I disagree with. None of that. That wasn't what I was asking. So this is the only option on the table. Have you all explored other options like selling the authority or?
The direction that I had was to deal with this. And I think that as Mr. Parker indicated and Mr. Morris, that's another thing that the board needs to look at. You're right.
So let me, without the dissertations, so you haven't looked at selling the authority, or that is an option. The option that's in front of us is a draft working paper, and it says specifically on, within 60 to 90 days, Director of Public Works, then effective immediately, all the service authority employees will be under the Human Resources Department, and then it says the first quarter of 2022, then there'll be another joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors, and then the next thing is 2023 is a merger, undertake transition with complete merger start by 2022 to 2023, and then it goes on down, and all it talks about is a merger with the county. It doesn't say that you're exploring other options or what's the best for everyone. All it says is this is, from what I hear tonight, is what you want to do is you want to merge it with the county. But there's still a bunch of, you talk about the 4 points, the financial point. So, we know that the service authority has millions of debt. What's the number?
29 million, is that?
29 million. It's $29 million in debt at this point. And the only ones that are paying that debt is the customers at this point. Well, from my understanding, if it goes to the utilities department, the customers are still paying the debt. So if it's going to be a utility, then everybody needs to pay the debt. It needs to be part of the county, if that's the way it's going to work. So there's still more debt. So our rates, I'm a customer, but I also represent people that are not customers. So the rates are really, really high, but they're not getting any lower. They're not going to get any lower.
Mr. Collins?
Can I finish? I let you speak for 10
I just want to clarify something. You say you represent people who are not customers. Everybody in your district is a customer, directly or indirectly, because if there's a fire, the water's coming from us. When their septic tank has to be pumped out every 10 years, where does the sewage go after it gets pumped out? It comes to one of the county treatment
plants. Can I finish my point?
So you represent everybody in your district, just not the paying customers.
I represent, the paying customers and the non-paying customers, okay? Or however you want to rephrase it. But, so there's $29 million in debt that's the paying customers are paying for. But then there's an additional debt that's being incurred for this, was it $16 million? For how much?
That's not additional, that's going to be, that's coming from government funds.
So what's the loan that?
It's not a loan, it's,
Now, there's another one.
You're talking about the line of credit that they
The line
have
of
to
credit.
take, yes.
yeah, that's
15
not
million.
being used.
Which has not been used.
So it's already been used for the meter,
Nothing has been paid for yet.
but it's going, come on. It's going to be used for that. It's going to be used to do other things, and the customer is going to get that $16 million. So let me finish. Sure. So the customer is going to get that additional $16 million. Well, our rates are already raising, was it 4% in 2023, 3% more in 2024, 4% in 2025, 2026, 4%, and 2027, 4%. That doesn't include.
I just want to clarify something, and Davenport probably could, just to clear it up for you. I believe the line of credit runs out very shortly. It would, okay, 2025. There's nothing in the planning to use that line of credit past the portion of the.
So can I finish without all these interruptions, please? So what I'm trying to express to you all is that the debt continues and the customers are still paying it. They're going to the rates are going to raise for the customers continually, and as more infrastructure occurs, the rates will go up even more. So it's not a sustainable. Let me ask a question to Ms. Cleveland, if you don't mind. Ms. Cleveland, what do you do for work?
I'm in finance,
Are you a vice president
yes,
of a major financial institution?
yes.
Is the Surface Authority sustainable at the way it's going financially?
Well, we do have Kyle here who knows much more than I do, I will say that. But he's even told this board that without a client base increasing with no additional connection fees, they would have to raise the rates in order to sustain the company.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm saying is that if you bring it under the county, you're going to make things better for the streamlining the HR and these other government functions, but it's not going to make it better for the customers, as I see it. I think that we should consider more options than, and this is a timeline. This is basically, I have heard nothing other than this is the way it's going. It's every time that I've talked to, every time I've talked to you, Mr. Miller, this is the route you're going. And so I paid attention to the Water Authority meetings, and I haven't heard any discussion other than they're going to talk to the Board of Supervisors. If you've been talking about it in closed session, I'm not privy to that information.
Can I make a suggestion for you? I would go talk to Aqua's customers. And I'm not throwing Aqua under the bus on purpose, but they ain't cheap. I'm well aware of what they cost. And you are selling it to them, you're in trouble. You ain't helping the customers. I'm well aware.
I'm not selling anything to anybody. What I want to see is all the options investigated so that everyone can make a decision based upon all the options and not one option. Whenever you have one option, it's deemed to fail. So that I will.
Okay. You agree that growth is coming to the county.
Yes.
You agree that we cannot survive on a residential tax base.
Well, that's a fact. We already have 45%.
You agree that we need residential we need commercial and industrial development here in the county to survive.
No, we need commercial and industrial, not residential.
Correct, to survive, okay? Service Authority needs tap fees to develop and to grow and everything else. We need these infrastructure in place to attract these businesses. We want things like data centers that use a lot of water, produce a little sewer. We want things that, again, going to come in and do hookup. We look at equivalent residential units. So a recent commercial occupancy that they just moved into, they were equal or worth 5 residential things for us. So one little business on our finance sheet, it was worth 5. Okay, that's a big plus for us. Not to throw anybody under the bus, but you want to take a guess at who one of our biggest water users in the county is?
No, I don't want to take a guess.
Wawa. Little Wawa is one of our bigger water users in the county. Who would have thunk?
So, Mr. Morris, obviously, this is a decision that you have made that this is the way you want to go.
No.
Because I hear no other options.
What other options are they? Stay the same, become a utility, or sell it out.
Hey guys, can I interrupt here just for a second? Mrs. Bender she wants to jump in here and she has a couple of ideas on options for you. So if she can go ahead.
And Mr. Parker and I took a wonderful tour in the rain of Perkins Corner and Dahlgren, and we had a frank conversation with Bowden, and it made me go back and look in my archives because I think technically I am the longest serving Service Authority member here, and Mr. Granger served for 4 years on the Service Authority. So we were here in the first DEQ consent order when Aqua was here. And so I went back and looked in my files, and these are files that I've had from searching the internet and poking around upstairs in old journal entries and everything, and going back to 1992, April 21st, when the Service Authority was created in the Articles of Incorporation. And in the past of the Service Authority, the county, believe it or not, it was eye-opening in the last couple of days. They put in money quite a few times, including in 1999 to 2022, I think it was, where they had $5,000 in cash reserves, and they had to lean on the county to get money to pay their debts. So there has been a commingling since 1992. And I'm going to be very frank and honest, it has been not done right from the very beginning. And when I say we have to take responsibility, it means all of us, because we inherit what all of our past people do. But we had thought of some options. I had thought of some options, and one of them is based on past practices of our county, is maybe that, you know, if it does become a public utility, and I'm not for everything on this option sheet, is it becomes, not sell the Service Authority, because having the Services Authority under the county's ownership is important for development and everything else, is that we pay an experienced company to run the wastewater services or the water and wastewater services. Someone who has more knowledge, experience about the certification, everything that is required to run a great water and sewer authority. We hire somebody, maybe all the employees go under their direction, maybe they stay as county employees, but we put it out for an RFQ, whatever the term would be for that. And we have a professional company run the Service Authority, because I don't think maybe we should be in the business of running a water and sewer authority. Going back over many, many years of DEQ consent orders, we have them going back to 1993. And we could argue all day about the creating of the Service Authority, but that is one option. There's selling it, there's maybe doing it as this option, there's also allowing a private entity to run it with the employees being our employees or their employees. Those are other options we could do, or we could stay the same. So there are more options, and I'm more than willing to type it all out. I've just been looking at too many documents over the last weekend to formally write it out. But I mean, I even created a document with all the past history on it, and it's not a pretty history, but there's a way we can move forward for the customers and our community, but we need to work together to do so and explore the options, and we do need to have public hearings. Because going back to 1992, that was a complaint that there wasn't enough discussion. It was just dropped on the public. And there was even a lawsuit from 1993 about the water and sewer not having a public comment. So I'm willing to have town halls and have more meetings, but there's some more options. I'm just going to throw them out there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
So, just one second. Mr. Granger,
Okay, 1 second. Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, thank you. So one of the things that Mr. Morris was talking about is the need to have the entire county support this. And I think that there's no doubt, I absolutely, as a client of the Service Authority, support that as well. However, in this working paper here, it says there should be strong walls in place to prevent any mixture of the funds. And this is where I think that we really need to talk through and iron out, because we have a lot of debt. Our rates are rising. It's very clear that if we don't have any connection fees and we don't have a customer base rising, which I don't think there's anything on the horizon, which the Board of Supervisors could probably tell me this, but it doesn't look like there's anything on the horizon to really offset these fees that we have. That being said, we got to figure out how the county can also support the Service Authority clients and how they can help to make sure that our water's clean and that we don't have issues with pipes that need to be fixed, because we obviously don't have the funds to be able to support that. I do want to ask a question after I say something that we talked about is right now as a Service Authority, we're sort of in a pseudo, right? We are pretty much a utility. To your point, we are, okay? But let's just make sure that everybody understands. We can use the county attorney, we can use the county engineer, we can use the HR. We have the Board of Supervisors on our board, and I think they maybe have to be, I'm not sure, but even people on our board that are not clients in the Service Authority. And a lot of times I hear, oh, well, I'll have better oversight. The county has had oversight. The county has Board of Supervisors on the Service Authority board. The county does sign off. I don't know if they sign off, but I know that they do view and see the audited financials. So they've had this information in front of them the whole entire time. So my question is, after all that, what is going to be the difference?
Who are you directing that to? I'm happy to answer it. Or I'm happy to let a board member. So you have that by virtue of an agreement. But if this Service Authority wanted to stay separate, and then my job as county administrator is going to be to say, do we have adequate compensation for the time that my finance director, my county engineer, my community development personnel, and the HR people are being used for their services, and they answer to the county administrator. And yes, you are correct in the sense that the Board of Supervisors at one time were the Board of Directors, but I'd make the argument that you're asking people to wear two hats. And I can tell you, I'm sure that those meetings where they were serving in that capacity were, let's get that meeting over with and let's get to the big picture, which is the Board of Supervisors meetings. That's human nature. Second of all, the situation is that you still had a general manager, and you still had the general manager that was calling the shots. I mean, so you might have had that situation, but it still was a separate entity. And what we're proposing here is that it's a department of the county. It's a department of the county that functions and has an expert that runs it, that has water utility services or background, or has sewer services background or construction background, but understands the management of a utility. It's essentially as if your previous general manager served under the county administrator and served under the county Board of Supervisors. And that wasn't the case. And so that's essentially what we're talking about. It's not necessarily saying that what you had in the past was bad, but to address growth, to address changing HR requirements, changing financial requirements, and keeping up to speed on those things, it's better if it's under one entity that's what they do all day long. And you're not asking staff to answer phones about bills and answer phones about service connections and things like that. And then, oh, by the way, I got to deal with somebody's personnel matter. That's where you have a problem, is that we're not running this organization to the best of its ability. And to my proposal, and it's a proposal, and my job is to propose things to you all. You all are the policymakers. You make decisions. I can make a proposal for 100 times and you can shoot me down. I won't keep coming back and making proposals. That's my job. You're the ultimate decision maker. I'm not. I don't have a vote up here. I am my job is to make recommendations, and your job is to act on them or not act on them. And so what I guess I'm saying is that this is the way that I have, in my experience, that it works best. I've been in cities. I was a city manager in a city where the utility was separate. And you want to talk about absolute power struggles and absolute issues with service under with the coordination, that was one of those situations. And it's just, it is just not a workable format.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. So I want to tell you that. But the one thing that I do want to point out is it's not really separate though. It's like this pseudo separate.
And that's what I'm saying. Let's either go, let's dip our toe, let's jump in or let's jump out. If we're going to be pseudo separate, you're not getting the best services. And that's where I'm saying it is.
And what I'm hearing you say also is that you would charge the service authority for the services if we weren't a county utility.
I'm saying that would be the efficient way for the county to operate. And in fact, there was a cost allocation plan that went back to 2015 that your previous general manager had got whittled down from like $150,000, which they never paid, to $1,000. Based on some kind of formula that he came up with that you guys all agreed on. And so what I'm saying is that if you're going to run your governments efficiently, if we're going to be worried about the taxpayers, what they're paying, just as much as we worry about the ratepayers, then you have to have a real true cost allocation where there is a cost that if they want to use AHR services, there's going to be services, there's going to be a fee. There has to be.
Well, it was likely set up that way because we don't have any money.
That's why I'm suggesting that this is one way of looking at it. One way. Yes, I agree. The sale of the system is another way, is another proposal, but I was directed to prepare just this one way. I know that you had been suggesting that we look at the option of the sale, and you're right. There should be some kind of analysis done on that, but I wasn't directed in that way. And if you all want me to look at it, I'm happy to do that. We'll put our resources together to start looking at it.
Well, I also agree from a long-term perspective that the sale is probably not the best. It's just when I hear these talks, like Mr. Morris getting passionate about everybody contributing, that's how I feel about it as well. I feel like we're a county, and regardless of if you're on a well and septic or if you're on the service authority, yes, we have to pay for the fire hydrants. We have to pay for Wawa. We have to pay for Walmart. And we have citizens that move into this county that have to pay the service debt, and they didn't incur the service debt. They just happen to move to a house that is on the service authority. And so I think that that's something that needs to be considered. That's something that's really important, I know, to me and the people that I'm representing.
And I think that that's a very fair point. And I know that when you look at it from a financial standpoint, I will say this, that you have two separate types of debt. You have the water and the sewer-based debt, back debt. That's the stuff that the service authority has done, long-term debt that they have, this credit line that you're talking about. That is backed by water and sewer revenue. You can't necessarily take money from the general fund and do that. If you do that, you affect your credit rating. You could affect the county's credit rating, and I'll certainly, Ms. Lax can tell you more about it. That's his expertise. You affect the credit rating of the county, and you would affect the credit rating of the service authority. So I understand, yes, things aren't going to necessarily change But one thing that can exist is the flexibility that if the county had to be in a situation to help the service authority out or whatever, you could do that. Where if you had, say you had a big project that you had to do and it was backed by water and sewer and it was also backed by general, you might have some way of tying them together. Right now, you can't necessarily do that. And I also am very much aware that the majority of the citizens of this county are not ratepayers. And so they need assurances that their money, their taxpayer, that their dollars for vehicles or on their property are not going to prop up the service authority. And I think that's why we have been very strong on the language of you've got to have a wall, you've got to keep this thing, which is what we're doing right now. I mean, you know, the finance department operates it obviously in a separate way, and we will continue to do that. But I think that's the key that I want everybody to understand. We're going to be even more stringent about that unless there's some policy that comes around and says you want to do something different. But I think that that's something that you'd want your financial advisor to weigh in on, because it would impact this county's credit rating if you ever went out and did some bond issues. So that's why we were.
So, Mr. Miller, there's no doubt that there's something has to be done.
Absolutely.
That's never been in question. Is something has to be done, you know, this is the end of the line. I mean, we already know that the system is failing. We have observed that. We know that got problems with Perkins Corner, and you had problems with Dahlgren, Oakland Park, problematic. So we know that there's something that has to be done. When we talk about the folks that pay taxes but have water and sewer, the one thing I just wanted to bring up on that issue is, so if a fire truck fills up at the fire hydrant at the fire station, which they do, and they go to Mr. Granger's house, who is not on the water and sewer, Mr. Granger is correct that his taxpayer money is paying for the fire department, and the fire department pays a water bill. But I'm a customer. I paid to get that water there. Right now, it's it costs millions of dollars in infrastructure. So if that's the case, then should we give a surcharge to come use the water at his house if we have to put out a fire? I'm just saying that there's a lot of options available that we just can't focus on one. We need to explore everything and then make an intelligent decision. And yes, you're right. I am concerned, though. I really, really, really am concerned. So I've been around a while, and the county has run the authority, and I think there's nobody in this room that would disagree that it's not been so good. There's still problems that exist that will need to be addressed, and you can't put all the debt on the customers. And I haven't heard, and I understand about the bond rating. There's everything in the county affects the bond rating. So I'm not disputing any of that. What I'm saying is that you have to look at, as Mr. Morris says, the big picture. So we only see one picture right now. I'd like to see all the pictures so we can, move forward and should the county be in the water and sewer business? I don't know that answer.
So I want to reiterate a few things that
Mr. Parker, can you hang on just for 1 second? Mrs. Kupka she had asked to jump in here when she gets a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to hear from the money guy. If you would, sir, our financial advisor, because Mr. Collins had some questions that were asked of Ms. Cleveland, and Ms. Cleveland did defer to our financial advisor. So the first question I had was, so this is the county financial report. Am I correct in that?
My eyes are getting worse as years go on, but
County of King George, Virginia, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, year ended June 30, 2021.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I perused this a great deal in the last couple of weeks, and I note everywhere that there's a blue sticky note, and there are 24 of them. That is a page in which somehow the proprietary fund or enterprise fund, which is King George County Service Authority, appears in the county financial report.
Correct.
Even though there is a separate financial report that's done for the service authority as well.
That's right.
Correct?
That's right.
Okay. So we already know that whether you want to say it or not, that the service authority is part of the county. It is managed through an enterprise fund, right?
That is indeed correct.
And the purpose of that is, that's a business practice in order, please.
The term enterprise fund, which as you see that in the county's audit, really gets to that concept of a business. So you talk about an enterprise, you're really thinking about a business. And so we'll call it the best practice and the way that that is accounted for across all state and local government across the country, not specific to King George or Virginia, is to account for that more alike a business is run. And so to Ms. Cleveland's point about maybe referring to it as a business, it is a business in a sense. And so you've got ratepayers that pay for the service, meaning being able to have access to that water and sewer. And having access to that water and sewer takes a fair amount of capital, right? And that takes a bunch of pipes and pumps, et cetera, to be able to get to that water and treat it and get it back into a sewer system in a responsible way. And so all of that gets packaged into what we call an enterprise fund, or think about it like a business. And as you look back over the years, you go back into the 90s, as I think Ms. Bender recognized a whole bunch of years ago at this point, but there were dollars physically transferring from the county to the service authority really to help support it. It wasn't a business that back in the day, so to speak, was really supporting itself the way that it should be. And as the county has grown and developed, and the rate base has grown and developed, and as the needs of the general fund have grown, and I think that's the other critical piece here, we're talking a lot about, and you're talking about, the water and sewer utility, but it is so intertwined with the county. And so the county's ability to go do those things, whether it be schools, public safety, radio station, radio systems, E911 systems, fire stations, its capacity to do that is dependent in large part upon having a self-supporting enterprise fund, whether that's an authority, whether that's a county utility. To a large extent, from a finance standpoint, as long as that business is paying for itself, which it has been for about the last 10 or so years, the capacity to go pay for the things like the schools, like the fire stations, like the E911 radio system is preserved for the county and the general fund. And so I think that's maybe just an important consideration. Again, to Mr. Collins's point about talking about the bigger picture, he's right in thinking about that bigger picture. And I would also argue, that you're right in terms of thinking about the credit ratings, because all these decisions do impact how King George is viewed by the credit rating agencies and the lenders that will eventually, when you have to do as a board, a school, a fire station, again, an E911 radio system, your ability and your capacity to do that is going to depend in part, not wholly, but in part upon whether or not that utility system, in whatever form it exists, is paying for itself and is self-supporting, which is that term that we use. So hopefully that in the short run is helpful. I'll make one just factual. The current amount of outstanding service authority debt is 23.6 million, just for record keeping purposes. If that matters, it's obviously in the audit and it's in the service authority audit. But that's the current amount outstanding.
Kyle, could you also speak to the line of credit? Because I think that's something that maybe needs to get an explanation about how it came about and why, and it was part of the whole financial retooling that the board of service authority directors did.
Yeah, so that line of credit, if you go back to about the 2018, 2019 time period, and some of your faces obviously were here, others are new, but at that time period, the board at the time and the general manager at the time, working through some of the consent order related items, came up with a list of about $15 million of capital projects that were required really for, we're not engineers, but really for the maintenance, upkeep, and enhancement of the existing infrastructure that made the service authority run. And so back in that 2018, 2019 time period, the plan that was put together took that into account, meaning understood that not only do we need to pay for the current operations and the current debt at that time, but we also need to have a capacity built in to be able to pay for and fund the improvements that are going to be part of the service authority system, as it's going to be part of any utility system. That's at some level the nature of having a utility system is having to continually make investments and improvements to it. No different than your house. You need every so often, you know, you need to fix the roof, you need to fix the air conditioning, you've got leaky pipes in the kitchen or wherever it is, and those investments need to be made. And while again, we're not engineers, they had kind of built up over time. And so the line of credit was envisioned and put in place to fund that list of capital infrastructure that was specific to the service authority, wasn't for anything else. It was specific for the service authority, and a list of projects that was put together by, I guess, the board and the manager at that time that would address the upkeep, enhancement, investment that needed to be made in the physical infrastructure of the pipes and the pumps, et cetera, of the authority at the time. So hopefully that's helpful. And to my knowledge, almost nothing has been drawn to date, but it is out there and available.
So Kyle, so I'm looking at your report, Davenport and Company, page 4 of the King George Service Authority multi-year financial plan update.
Sure.
And
Mr. Collins, can you tell me the date on that?
October 2021.
Okay. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll go off memory to the best of my ability.
You have a graph here, and so you see that the debt service is going up and up every year. That's correct, right?
Well,
so 2014, it says here that, the debt service.
Yeah, Mr. Collins, do you mind if I just grab that for a second?
You have that first. You got.
Okay. So the debt service has gone up. Yeah. And so in 2019, as a result of the service authority's plan, they basically were at zero. In other words, they had enough debt and enough customers. The customers were paying for the debt, and that's why it didn't go the opposite direction, where they needed more money. So I guess I didn't explain that very well. Let's try that again. So the county, the customers are paying for the debt service that continually rises. And the only reason why the water authority is still solvent is because of the customers paying the debt. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I mean, that is the source of revenue to pay for the operations and the debt service of the utility. Again, because those customers that are using the water and sewer and thus have bought into, in a sense, that system, right? So you buy a house, you pay an availability fee, which is your proportionate share of the capital cost of all the pipes and the pumps, et cetera. And then that is the sort of ongoing cost of being a part of that water and sewer system, and getting up, being able to turn on the tap and have water come out.
So you're familiar with, because you've been to service authority meetings and you presented to them on several occasions, and so you're familiar with the problematic of the equipment. That's where most of the debt's coming from. Pipes, pumps, pumping stations, all that, right? So
Generally,
we
right.
know that it's going to cost more money because there's so many problems. I don't think anybody would disagree with me, would they?
It's going to cost more money. Where that money comes
Where that
from
money comes from is the question.
is the question, yes. Because right now, if it goes through, there's a lot of money to fix a lot of the problems coming from the state, right? There, it's in the budget. So it's kind of a few points to point out, I guess, on the finances. One, and I think Kathy did the research, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but the county's been paying a lot of money into the service authority over the years. And if I remember looking at the financials way back, it was several hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. It's gotten better since a certain point, long before I got here. And I know the kind of the board that was on before me for 4 years really made a lot of corrections. So the county taxpayers have been paying a lot of money to the service authority, whether they knew it or not. It's been there. It's been there for a while. Into the finances and whatnot, and this is one of the reasons probably we haven't considered the sale, right? The reason there's a possibility for $16 million for the sewer upgrades and whatnot, and about $5 million other dollars for water upgrades, is because Ms. Kupka really took the bull by the horns and got a lot of stuff done politically. If we sold that off to an entity like Aqua, that $16 million coming out of your pocket, my pocket. I'm a customer too. They're not getting government money to do that. That's not how the private industry works. They're going to take out a loan of $20-something million, and it's going to come through your pockets. So and this may be bad on our part for short circuiting things like that, but the reason the sale was never seriously considered, besides an innumerable amount of other reasons, is that you disconnect yourself from politics, good, bad, or indifferent, right? You disconnect yourself from politics. If we were a big service authority and disconnected from politics and just swimming in money, which, we'd love to be, who gives a darn? We'd have so much money, our rates would be low, we wouldn't care, we'll do whatever we feel like. That's great. We need, in the service authority, to have that political influence, and thankfully Ms. Kopko was on the board and knew who to pull strings with, and Senator Stewart really helped out. And hopefully, knock on wood, the budget goes through and we get that money and we can make a lot of improvements that won't cost the ratepayers a cent, and may help out in the future to lower the rates because we're not going to have to pay for it. But from a sales standpoint, you'd be hosed. That Aqua or whoever else buys us would just have to pay it. I mean, the improvements have to be made, whether the state pays for them or the ratepayers pay for them. They have to be made. So we did short circuit some of the stuff in here with kind of that knowledge. So I mean, if it's something that we'd like to look into, but there was considerations in that it just didn't seem like a reasonable path forward, particularly with the government help from the state, because the state really does want certain things and are willing to pay to get those certain things, and that helps the ratepayers. They want Perkins Corner gone. They'd like Oakland Park gone. They'd like the consolidation of systems. They'd like the water system improved, and they're willing to pay for it. So, without the political clout, that comes out of the ratepayers' pocket. So that's kind of where we are with the.
So what happens if?
Can I interrupt you guys for a second? Mrs. Kupka still had the floor before she was interrupted, and so she can continue.
I'm used to that.
Okay, she can continue with her questions while Kyle is here to answer the questions, and then we can go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So another question, Kyle, that sort of has come up based on the discussion right now. So I have a memo dated November 15th, 2019 from Mr. Weekly, and I was not on this board at that time, which actually lists the projects that you referenced, the pump station upgrades, the Perkins Corner wastewater treatment plant upgrade, the decommissioning of Oakland Park, new sludge handling facility, the Nines well system overhaul, remaining well system repairs, and potential water line system interconnections. And he states, these are just some items we have identified through our utility master plan. The key to address these items will be capital planning and identifying funding sources beyond the revenue we receive from our customers. Do you agree with that sentence? The key to address these items will be capital planning and identifying funding sources beyond the revenue we receive from our customers.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Thank you. Okay, so then I would note also in the same presentation that you made before us on, let me differentiate which board, the Service Authority Board of Directors. On October 19th, 2021, the same presentation that Mr. Collins inquired about. There is on page 11, you presented to us under approach to the updated multi-year financial plan. The last bullet point said, introduce a potential opportunity to restructure a portion of the authority's outstanding debt in order to free up cash flow over the next 10 plus years and, importantly, to relieve pressure on user rate increases. So you presented that to us that night as well, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so if we go to scenario 2, and let me note page 16, it says Davenport prepared an additional scenario for discussion that entails restructuring a portion of the service authority's existing debt, approximately $9 million or 40% of total service authority debt, to level off and flatten the increase in debt payments that occurs in fiscal year 2025. Okay, so on page 17, then you presented that updated multi-year financial plan with debt restructure. And there's a green box with an arrow that says restructuring the next plan increase in debt service could reduce the need for additional user rate increases. So then the next page has an updated multi-year financial plan with debt restructure. And the last page, page 19, has next steps. So you list Service Authority develops fiscal year 2023 budget, which we're going to start next month is my understanding. Service Authority begins capital projects. And so key to that was the Service Authority approving a capital improvement plan in the last quarter of 2021.
Yes, ma'am.
Consistent with Mr. Weekly's memo that says capital planning is one of the keys.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about.
So then the next thing here is evaluate options for new money and refunding / restructuring. We haven't done that yet, right? You haven't brought that back to us yet, correct?
Not in great detail, no. We've done a little bit of sort of what we'll call back of the envelope work, but I think what we've been interested in hearing before we enact any specific plan is a lot of this discussion here in terms of what the capital program does look like, knowing you've got a bunch of new faces and management in that sense. Then also, in fairness, some of the to Mr. Parker's comments, there's some of the federal money that has sort of come in to help out on some of those capital projects. So I would, everything we had there still stands. That's accurate. And what we're still thinking about, but this is clearly an important discussion before you move forward with anything specifically, if that's helpful in answering your question.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So the bottom line is there's still an opportunity here for you to continue that work and come up with a future opportunity for a debt restructure for 2025.
Yes, yeah, there is.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Kyle, future expansion of the authority. In other words, if want to run water and sewer down 301, who pays for it?
Well, that is really up to, it's up to you collectively in whatever collective decision-making body that is. In the traditional sense, the users of that water, those who are going to benefit from it, would be the payers in the traditional sense of things. But that really is kind of up to the collective decision-making body and the, we'll call it the facts and circumstances of what that looks like.
So for my simple understanding, so if they decide to go down 301 with water and sewer, are you saying that the ratepayers will pay for that infrastructure?
I'm saying that is certainly a possibility. That's probably the traditional way of looking at it, and that keeps things most aligned in terms of water and sewer being fully self-supporting and the general fund being separate.
Here's a question for the Board of Supervisors and maybe yourself, right? So you decide, Board of Supervisors decides you want to put something down 301, needs to run a water line, right? If I'm not going crazy, you could put that in economic development. Suddenly economic development has, $10 million to run a water line because they needed to have a data center sitting down there. All right. So to the point sort of with the utility, you guys would be in control. The Board of Supervisors would be in control of that decision.
We have done that actually with running the water line down to the 3301 intersection. It was because of the economic development in particular for having the sheets be able to hook up and then provide water down to that area because it is identified as an area of development. It was $1 million and that was a capital improvement project that was on the Board of Supervisors and coming out of the CIP for the Board of Supervisors that year. And for good reason, because it was to the benefit of the county in order to run that line. And it would be similar. The answer to your question is maybe. And it's not something you can answer right now really easily because it's going to have to look at what is the motivation for running that line. And so that's what it's going to be.
Piggyback off Mr. Granger, we do know with the state funds that possibly could come is that running the line down from Perkins Corner all the way down to Hop Yard would be paid for with those funds, the water and sewer. And that is an opportunity the county has received and people who can hook up on that and it would upgrade the system. So that would be another benefit coming from the county.
So the capital improvement plan that you speak of, or Ms. Kupka speak of, that's been approved, that plan is coming from the loan, is that correct?
That, if you go back to 2019, that's right. That's right. And those projects, I think it's important to differentiate here, given the conversation here. Those projects, to the extent of my knowledge, again, we're not the engineers here, but those were to make needed improvements to the existing system that has existing customers on it. So I think important to differentiate there between a new water line that may be for economic development purposes versus making improvements to an existing or series of existing portions of the system. So just to make that clarification.
And Mr. Collins, so that, as Kyle indicated, that plan was identified in 2019, and then I think, obviously the county dealt with COVID, and that kind of shelved a lot of what they were doing. And so when Mr. Weekly was leaving, he gave me this information and said, these are the capital projects that the Service Authority is in need of doing, and emergency type, not emergency, but critical, urgent. And so that was what we put in place that was approved by the board of the directors in November. And I think, going back to what you indicated, and I think as Mr. Granger indicated, so if there was a subdivision that came in and say it had like 300 units or something like that, and they wanted to be on water, we would work with them to try to get that water to them. And it would be those units that come in that would pay for some of that extension. And it might benefit people in between that subdivision and where we started that line. That's typical of what utilities do. And so
Right.
you could do that. It's the same thing if
Right,
a big company came in.
They pass it on to the homeowner, but yet the infrastructure still has to be paid for by the debt payers. Is that correct?
No, not really.
No, the
So
rate-
the hookup,
yeah.
so we were looking at a subdivision that got shelved. It didn't go through. But the plan was the developer was going to prepay the tap fees. Basically, I guess maybe half the subdivision, third of the subdivision. That would have covered the hookup cost, the construction of the line. So they were prepaying. So the first 100 houses or whatever it was, that fee was already prepaid. So that covered the cost of doing that line. It wouldn't have affected, there was no debt taken out. And that's generally how this board looks at it. So if a developer's coming in to improve something, the tap fees need to cover what they're doing, or we wouldn't.
So you have that line in, the people are all happy or whatever, and so then there's maintenance on that line.
And that's what your monthly rates would go towards, which, would be your monthly water and sewer rate if you're on water.
So apparently, I mean, you're directing the question to me, you're directing the answer to me. So I'm not anti anything. I just want all the options. So this is the first discussion that I other than the 2x2 meeting that I've been privy to. So as a Board of Supervisor member, I'd like to have all the options before I make a decision, even though it sounds like some decisions have already been made. Before I make a decision, I would like to see all the options.
Mr. Collins, I don't think any decisions have been made. This is the first time we've spoken about this. The first time that we supervisors who are not on the service authority have heard about it, except for our original, meetings with the service authority. So as Mr. Miller said, he was directed to look at a merger of service authority in the county as a Department of Public Works or whatever the name was going to be. He was not directed to look into selling the service authority. So that's where we are. Decisions haven't been made. The Service Authority Board of Directors nor the Board of Supervisors have decided anything. That is up to us later on.
Well, I don't know.
So the easy way to do it is, sell it. I mean, I was always a big proponent of that, just to say, hey, I would love to get $30 million, wash away the debt and have somebody else run it. But then the problems you run into where, someone in Fairview Beach contacts you as their representative and says, hey, I've got bad water, I have bad service. And then you go, sorry, you need to call the water company. So, how many times in, our last careers, do you have to go and talk to somebody and say, sorry, I can't help you. And if you do sell it to another company, you or myself or any of us as a representative of those people, we have no authority over that. So, at some point, I kind of, I haven't made any decisions. I'm right in the middle of the road getting information.
So, Mr. Stonehill, just on your point, so, you say sell and then you talk. So if this is a question of control, I don't think that's the right, or I'm not going to say what's right because I can't put myself in your place, but I don't think that's the right direction to go if this is about a politically control. But when you say that this is not enforced, well, it says right on number 2 that effective immediately, all personnel. So the process is already stepped up.
If I could answer that. So when I became the interim general manager, probably about 2 months into it, we realized that some of the personnel administration and some of the financial administration wasn't necessarily coming under the county. And you do have an agreement right now where we provide the services. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to make assurances to the board of directors and also, to you all as supervisors that the financial operations and the personnel operations were under county services, and make it clear, because there was some discrepancy. There was some confusion on the part of staff And I would imagine on some of the part of the board of directors is that, so I wanted to make that, that's the most declarative statement that I've made. No action obviously was taken by the board because I have the authority to direct the operations of this organization, the service authority, and as I also have the operational authority of the county to make these kind of decisions.
So who directed you to do this for a merger? The authority?
No, this is my proposal.
Okay.
In a
You keep saying
discussion.
directed.
I presented this in a discussion with the board and through private conversations, individual conversations with individual board members. And, you know, we arrived at this discussion. It was kind of like if the Board of Supervisors makes a decision that I propose to you that you're going to build another ball field, and you all have discussions with me, and we come back and you make a decision. That would be how that was done.
So, you know, I just keep going back to the options thing. So this is the first public meeting. So
Can I tank your options real quick? And I don't mean to be mean about this, but the way this works is the board of directors for the service authority directs the manager to put proposals together. And you're getting wrapped around things a little too much because you're on the board of supervisors, but your decision is whether or not you think this is a good idea. The board of directors for the service authority, talking amongst each other, has not concluded that the sale is a good idea. And we're not going to direct Mr. Miller unless my other members talk to us and we getting back that we really want him to waste his time doing it to check out a sale, okay? That's how this works, right? So we're presenting it, we think this might be a good idea, right? And we're asking whether, as the board of supervisors would have to be part of it, whether you think it's a good idea or not. You can tank it. You guys can say, no, I don't like it, whatever, you know, go back to the drawing board. But the 5,000 option thing is not how this works, right? If you want other options, right, talk to Ms. Cleveland. She's your representative. You appointed her, right? And she'll come and talk to all of us on the board. If we think it's a good idea, we'll direct Mr. Miller, right? But that's not how this works. We're just presenting something to you we think is a good idea. If you have questions on this idea, you can make, because it needs both boards to work together to do it. But we're not going to go through 700 options if it doesn't go through the right process. So if you think there's another option that you'd like to see, presented Ms. Cleveland. Again, she'll bring it to us. If we all collectively think it's a good idea, we'll ask Mr. Miller to do something about it. And if we don't think it's a good idea, Mr. Miller's not going to do anything about it. That's the way it works. So focus on what we're trying to accomplish here is, do you think this is a good idea? I'm trying not to be snarky and mean about it, but I'm not a government employee, but that's how this is supposed to work.
Well, so you represent members of the public, and I do too. So you represent the service authority members, and so I think the public should have options, and then they give us the feedback of what they want. We don't make a decision based upon what I want. What I want is to have my bills lowered and to have a sustainable unit, whatever it may be. But I think it'd be fair to the public not to take an option away from them until they know about it.
Mr. Parker, Mr. Bender has a question.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. And I don't think anybody's ever asked you this question in the 5 years, and it comes off of one of the So is there, to keep it as an enterprise fund, is there any possible way that you can commingle funds or tax? Say example, you did a one-time tax all the citizens of King George of $100 to pay towards the debt. Is that even possible, commingling like that? I mean, I don't think anybody's ever asked you that question.
So I think that the answer to that, I think, plays a couple different levels. A part of it's probably legal. A part of it's going to be more in the accounting world, which is not our world. And a part of it's going to be finance, which is our world. Could you do that on the first two levels? I can't answer that question. On the third level, on the, we'll call it the finance side, the problem with doing that, given the history that you have, And given the knowledge we have that on the general fund, we have pressures and needs, et cetera, is at that point, you end up kind of merging the financials and merging the debt, whether it's on paper or not, of the utility and the general fund. And so, and you may remember this, and we're happy to put it together for everybody in the past, like when we look at the general fund's debt ratios and those debt policies, if we were to do that and inject dollars on an ongoing basis from the general fund, what we run the risk of doing is saying, all right, we're just merging all this stuff. And thus the obligations all get merged together. And so our capacity to go do schools and fire stations and need 911 is either significantly diminished, probably significantly diminished, or just may go away entirely. So I think long-winded way of saying that there's a legal question and there's a maybe an accounting question, but I think a practical question for what overall King George County needs to do is if you do that, you run the risk of really hamstringing the needs on the general fund side of things. And the ability to take care of those needs.
Going on that point, it seems in my research that not a lot of places, maybe Pennsylvania would be the only one, that they decided to be a public utility a long time ago. They didn't go through all what we've done up to this point. Do you know of any localities, like how do they pay for the debt from a public utility? Do
users pay for it?
Users pay for it?
Yeah. I mean, the nature of having a water and sewer utility is to have a lot of capital infrastructure, which again is those pipes and those pumps and the plants and et cetera, et cetera. And the users of the system pay for the debt. Whether there's a separate debt fee or not, I live in Henrico. Henrico has a very large utility system that is a department of the county. It has debt outstanding. Part of your monthly bill is paying for the debt of that. The same with Richmond, the same with Chesterfield, the same with any other variety of places. One place that doesn't operate like that is Powhatan. Powhatan has for years had to subsidize its water and sewer utility system for any variety of different policy reasons. And what that means is that when it comes time to go make an investment in schools or public safety, they have to not only measure their obligations of the general government, but they've got to add the utility obligations to it. And so, if you maybe want a couple different ways of thinking about it, you've got what is the norm, which is to have the utility system, whether it's the operations or the debt, paid for by those users of the system that benefit from the system.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yeah, so I wanted to answer to, I'm not sure who it was about options, because I did ask for additional options already. And most of the board that I spoke with were more leaning toward the county utility. Additionally, there was a couple that were maybe in agreement to search for another GM, which I've been pressing for the last 6 months. But I do have a question for you. I was wondering about how this was separated originally. So originally it was with the county and then they decided to separate it out.
No, I mean, to the extent of my knowledge, it was always a separate authority, but in the early days, it couldn't pay for itself. So it needed to have dollars come from the general fund to subsidize and support it. And so back in those early days, you had to look at a combined, when you were measuring the overall financial wherewithal and debt capacity and capital investment capacity of the county, you had to add the two of them together.
So why is it that I've been told that the reason why it was separated was because it didn't want to hurt the bond rating? Is there any merit to that originally?
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're saying all the same things. So again, if you were to take, and again, you said you work in finance. So if you're looking at maybe making a loan to someone that has their own income, their own personal expenses, et cetera, and they can cover all of that, you're going to look at that analysis differently than if they're also maybe co-signing and subsidizing some other entity. The parallels may not be exact, but the ability to have the utility be self-supporting and paying for itself factors into how the rating agencies look at the general fund, which is what we refer to as the county.
I don't think I'm asking it right. So, because.
So I'll take it one step further, get right to the credit rating. So what the credit rating agencies are looking at is the general fund supporting just the general fund, or is it supporting the general fund and the service authority? And so right now, and for the last decade, the general fund has been supporting the general fund. If you go back call it 2010 or thereabouts, the general fund had to support both of those things. And so if you also take a look at where the county's credit ratings have been over that time period, they have been on a steadily increasing trend. So right now our credit ratings are, off the top of my head, AA2 from Moody's, I think we're AA from S&P and AA plus from Fitch. And so when the county goes and borrows money for the middle school, for the courthouse, et cetera, its ability to do that and the cost of doing that is much, much lower to the taxpayers of the county, because when we go talk to the credit rating agencies, our obligations are just of the county. We're not having to also shoulder the burden of the county and the utility. So hopefully is that answering and getting to what you were asking?
It does, but it still doesn't make sense, and this may not be a question for you, or maybe in your experience if you've had it before, of why they separated in the beginning then. Like it was with the, not a county utility, but I think this
Why was
like
the service
it was made into a corporation.
That I don't know. I don't know.
Like, why financially would you do it?
I think Mrs. Bender may have a little history on that.
Well, I do want to know, like, why financially one would do that. Do you know why?
I mean, it tends to be more policy related than it does financially related. I mean, I think Mr. Parker gave a couple of good examples whereby, if you go look at like a Loudon Water, it technically used to be LCSA. It's a massive entity. They have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank. And they're able to operate very much independent of the county. They're AAA rated by themselves. And so that is an example of an authority that is able to truly operate almost like a corporation. It's so profitable and has the reserves that it does. And so there's a variety of different reasons you think about an authority versus a utility. But from a financial standpoint, given where King George is and where you've been, and I think it's been said here, you're effectively, and I would agree with Mr. Parker, you're effectively operating like a county utility system, at least from our standpoint from the finance. We're not operations people and the HR, et cetera. That's not our world. But you're effectively operating as a department of the county, at least from a financial, and to Ms. Kupka's point, I mean, the financials of the authority, even though there's technically a separate audit, it all shows up in the audit right there. The debt, here's the other important point. The debt of the authority is all backed by the Board of Supervisors. And so the ultimate ability of the authority to go borrow money and make the investments that need to be made to run a utility has really for years been dependent upon the Board of Supervisors and the general fund's ability to kind of co-sign on all of those loans. And so the authority has really benefited from that as you've been able to take out loans with the state programs, with the Virginia Resources Authorities and their various programs, bank loans, et cetera. The creditworthiness of this for most of the authority's history has been based upon the fact that the county has co-signed on it. All of that $23.6 million that the county has basically helped to support and back, such that lenders are willing to make a loan.
Okay, just one more question, then pass on. When we were talking earlier about the financial plan, and we were talking about how if you restructure the debt after this 5-year initial rate increase, that it's potential that the ratepayers would not have to pay any additional increases. My question is, did you incorporate the additional 15 million that's going to be, okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So that 15 million has always been in the plan. And to the point on the restructuring, That again, you're talking about a bunch of options here. That's an option. It doesn't have to happen, but it is an option. I think it's one of those things that working with, however, the combined group wants to look at these various things, that it's one variable as you think about how you work with the existing debt, where you're getting new dollars, whether it's from state, federal funds. Those have been, I would argue, big needle moving sort of developments in your overall financial picture in the last 12 or 18 months that were not at all, the situation you go back into 2019. So you have a lot of big variables, to look at. That's one of them. Doesn't have to happen, but certainly it could happen if that's the direction of the group.
Ms. Cleveland, and I believe that Ms. Lackey sent information out to all the board members of the Service Authority and to the Board of Supervisors about that 15 million, and it dates, I believe, like fall of 2019, I think. Is that what it?
I think the board resolutions, if I'm not mistaken, were like June and August of 2019. So I think the actual financing probably that fall.
Well, I just want to clarify, because I did the research, and I think it's important, though, that the public understands. So going back, way back in the history, there were two sanitary districts, the Dahlgren District and the Fairview Beach Sanitary District. And different reasons, the state and VDH, they talked to the Board of Supervisors at the time, and they felt that it was in the best interest of the citizens of the county to incorporate a service authority, because the Fairview Beach system was self-sustaining, but did not have a lot of customers and capital overlay to make improvements that needed to be done. And the Dahlgren Sanitary District had lost a lawsuit and owed quite a bit of money, and they were not able to pay it. And so because of that, they took them on, and then they eventually, a year later, acquired systems from Sidner, and I think it was Alpha was the other company. And so they were all separate entities that the county at the time and those in charge felt it was in the best interest for the safety and the health of the citizens to bring them together. Now, maybe their actions in the past, they were trying to do the right thing, but many different things happened. But that's the back history. It was never, they were just brought in all these systems together and created the service authority.
Anybody else? Okay. Not seeing anything. We will close up the discussion, and do we have a motion?
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors convene in closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A5 and A6 to discuss raw water requirements related to a prospective business or industry where there is no previous announcement of a business or industry locating or expanding in the community, and discussion or consideration of the joint investment of the public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, or if made public initially, the financial interests of the governmental unit would be adversely affected. I invite the members of the King George County Public Service Authority Board of Directors, County Administrator, County Attorney, County Engineer, and Engineering Consultant because they are deemed necessary and or their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712F.
If I may, Mr. Granger, is there interest in having Mr. Lau in the closed session as well?
I move
That's
to,
financial consultant.
yes, I would like to make a motion. I'm sorry. Do we need to second that first, and then I'll make a motion to
Second.
Do we need a board?
I'll second.
Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion to amend my previous motion to include Mr. Lau to be invited in as well as part of this closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. We're in closed session.
If I may, we also need a motion from the service authority as well if they're going to participate.
Same thing.
All right. I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors convene in closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A5 and A6 to discuss well water requirements related to a prospective business or industry where there is no previous announcement of a business or industry locating or expanding in the community, and discussion or consideration of the joint investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interests of the governmental unit would be adversely affected. I invite the members of the King George County Board of Supervisors, interim general manager, county attorney, county engineer, and engineering consultant because they're deemed, that's Mr. Lau, necessary and/or their presence will be reasonably aid the board in its consideration of topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712F.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion's carried. We're in closed session.
Everybody good? All right, Mr. Granger, we have a motion for the Board of Supervisors.
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
All right, Board of Supervisors.
Second.
Certified.
Certify.
Certify.
So certified.
So certify.
Chairman so certifies. The Board of Supervisors is now in session.
I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors return to public meeting and certified by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
Motion is made and second.
So certified.
So certified.
So certified.
So certified.
James Moore, so certified. Motion carried. We're in open session.
All right, do we have a motion?
Sure, I'm just going to verify because on the sheet it says until 6 p.m. It's 5:30 though, right? Tomorrow, yes. Just want to make sure.
5:30.
That's what's on the sheet. I thought it was 5:30.
My understanding was 5:30
Five.
because staff had requested
That was
5:30.
mine as well.
Yeah, it says 5:30.
Okay. I move to adjourn until Wednesday, March 23rd at 5:30 p.m. in the boardroom.
We have a motion properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Board of Supervisors are adjourned.
I make a motion that the Board of Directors adjourn until Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. here in the boardroom.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned until Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. here in the boardroom.